Also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography.
Yes, Dr. Clark.
It tells of people where they have been and what they have been,
Yes.
where they are and what they are.
Yes.
Most important, history tells a people where they still must go and what they still must be.
Yes, sir.
The relationship of history to the people is the same as the relationship of a mother to her child.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Today's guests, Herb Boyd, who I think is on his way, and of course, Graham Weatherspoon. The reason why Dr. Clark is so significant is that we are here today in historic times, and this murder of a young child, 3 weeks into his 17th year on the planet, was hunted down and slain by George Zimmerman. Now, in this piece here today, we're going to give you a little outtake on, you get to be the judge and the jury, and I'm going to let you take a look at him in his environment with Sean Hannity later on in the program. But welcome to the show, Graham Weatherspoon.
Thanks,
you
Winston.
realize that Graham's an ex-officer, and he is well aware of what you do with a weapon. You've heard the nuts call up in there, when do we shoot people down? When do we have the right to use our weapon? I'm sure you've got quite a bit to say about this one. And a few comments about a couple of the jurors also. How's it going, man?
Well, I really didn't watch the trial.
But you told me that he was going to get off free.
Yeah,
didn't you?
I told you that.
I didn't believe you. I mean, I was in shock. I mean, I was in total shock. I sat there for at least 10 minutes with my mouth open. I just couldn't believe it. I said, wait a minute. With the world watching, they still get away with this racist
It's not about
garbage?
the world. It's about winning a case. That's all it's about. I told you the fact that they had a jury of all women didn't make a bit of difference. Because you don't know who these women are, who they're married to, and how they've raised their children in relation to people of color.
Right.
And as we find out, the juror who spoke up is married to an attorney.
Right.
And she said that she felt sorry for Trayvon and she felt sorry for George Zimmerman equally. Well, the damages to the two individuals are not equal.
Right.
Trayvon is dead. George is alive. Trayvon's parents have lost a child. George's parents, they just went through the hassle of having a trial, but their son is still alive.
Right.
And will be carrying a gun again.
Right. Give him back his permit.
Right. And we've seen this play out before. Earlier this year, Ray Kelly gave Kenneth Boss his gun back. And Boss was one of the cops that murdered Amadou Diallo.
Amadou Diallo.
And he said it was on a technicality that came out of the Sean Bell case. Time will prove whether or not Ray Kelly's judgment was good with regard to giving Kenneth Boss his gun back. They spoke about his career in the military, going to Iraq, has no bearing on anything relative to the city of New York. It's not this is not a combat zone.
Right.
Eric Adams commented in The Chief a few months ago that combat duty and serving as a police officer are two entirely different venues. Combat soldiers.
What made you so confident that he was going to get off? I know it's a southern atmosphere, it's the South. I mean, Florida, a lot of people don't think of Florida as the South, but it is the South. And they have all these laws. We know the first election in 2000 was stolen by Florida with the Jeb Bush.
And you saw the people standing online to vote.
Right.
In the last election. you have to understand that Florida has not caught up with the times. And
But with a high-profile case like this,
they don't care.
how could they not care in the world?
You have to understand the language of the dominant culture. When they say justice has been served,
Yeah.
that is a term, a loose term, that they use just to justify the outcome. Well, the jury decided X and we should abide with what the jury says. Not looking at how they picked the jury. When you have wives of attorneys and other high-profile people sitting on a jury, that was not a jury of his peers. But then again,
Far from it.
his father is a former judge.
Right. Zimmerman. Right.
Zimmerman's father is a former judge. So in looking at how this case unfolded from the very beginning, it was about a cover-up. And there was no desire to prosecute George Zimmerman. The detective who arrested him was told to release him because the Attorney General called and said, let him go. Now that detective has resigned from the Detective Bureau and gone back into patrol because he knew that that was wrong and he didn't want any part of it. See.
Well, you can tell by the public's reaction. There are quite a few people out there don't agree with the jury's decision, and the way it was dealt with, and when they sent back in a questionnaire questioning manslaughter, which they couldn't. They were overcharged in the beginning. I've been with groups of lawyers at NAN that all agree that the initial charge should have been manslaughter, and manslaughter should have been explained to the thorough understanding of the jurors. They didn't understand it. There were lawyers out there saying that they didn't quite understand the instructions. So, I mean, there's a miscarriage of justice just by the judge not being able to explain it properly. And with that being said, you could see how 3 of the jurors were persuaded from, there were 1 for murder 2, and there were 2 for manslaughter. But these 3 converted to innocent, not guilty. But in the beginning, the first poll, before they even started deliberation, was 3 for not guilty. Now, how is that? Because I think George Zimmerman was painted in the eyes of the females as a hero, that he was standing up for the community. But everybody missed the fact that he profiled a young man that was innocent. I mean, where's the guilt? Where does it, doesn't some guilt come from that? He made a mistake?
George Zimmerman, when you listen to the tape, his comments were biased comments.
Of course they were.
From the beginning. And just like people that call in, they're trying to set up a scenario whereby they can do what they want to do.
Right, okay.
So Zimmerman is talking to the police officer.
He's setting himself up.
The police officer told him, do not exit your vehicle. Now in New York, that statute—
he said, we don't need you to do that.
Right. Stay in your vehicle. In New York, that would be failure to comply with a lawful order, a misdemeanor.
Right.
You're not a police officer. You're not sworn as a public safety officer. Stay out of it.
Right.
His comments regarding Trayvon were very biased, prejudicial, racist, and later he talks about Trayvon jumping out of the bushes. There were no bushes, okay? The defense attorney was on television yesterday talking about how Trayvon jumped out of the bushes. If you tell a lie long enough, people will certainly start to believe it. But there were no bushes, and the prosecution failed to hammer that simple point. People hear they get a lot of information prior to a trial, and I call that poisoning the jury pool. I've never served on a jury. Matter of fact, I have paperwork to send in now to see if I will.
Okay.
You know, but my observations and the questions that I would ask would probably drive both sides crazy. Most lawyers would not want me on a jury because I know what to look for and what to ask. But in this case, from the very inception, it was about letting him go.
Right.
And another thing is that the family didn't even know where his body was.
Yeah, right. For 3 days.
For 3
you know?
days.
Yeah, right.
Now,
Right.
that's a little cow town
Yeah.
in Florida. Why are they hiding? And they do the same thing here in New York. They've done that here in New York, right?
No respect for human life.
Why are they hiding?
Because the kid was black.
The body
Let's be real.
of a-
All right, you know what we're going to do so
ahead.
Herb can come on the set here.
All right.
I'm going to introduce to the public, and we're going to take call-ins eventually, but I just want to give you an idea of Zimmerman on a Hannity show. Now, this is the hard right, you know, what Hannity and Fox are about. But I want you to judge for yourself, is this man lying? Just look in his eyes and listen to him and his whole tone. You be the judge, and you make your own decision. Here's George Zimmerman, a side of him that none of us really see unless we watch Fox. But you be the judge, all right? Just play that roll in.
What do you want to say to people that did rush to judgment, that suggested there was racial profiling in this case and that there was some other motivation in this case?
That I'm not a racist and I'm not a murderer.
When you think back, and there was one report or a police report that actually said you didn't know after you fired, you thought you missed?
Yeah, I didn't think I hit him, yes.
Yeah. So what happened immediately after the shooting then, George? I understand one guy came out, he said he had a flashlight, that he spoke to you, and you said to call your wife, tell her what happened, that I shot somebody. Do you remember that conversation?
The conversation I had with the gentleman, or?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You do remember that conversation. And he did talk about it, and what his suggestion is that you were very matter-of-fact about it. Do you remember what you said to him? Do you think you were in a state of shock? Did you know that Trayvon, when did you know that Trayvon had died?
When I went, probably about an hour after I got to the police station.
After the shooting, you saw that he was laying there and obviously injured, there was a moment where you realized that he was shot?
Like I said, he sat up and he said something to the effect of, "You got it," or "You got me." I assumed he meant, okay, you got the gun, I didn't get it, I'm not going to fight anymore. At which point, I got out from under him.
Is there anything you regret? Do you regret getting out of the car to follow Trayvon that night?
No, sir.
Do you regret that you had a gun that night?
No, sir.
Do you feel you wouldn't be here for this interview if you didn't have that gun?
No, sir.
You feel you would not be here?
I feel that it was all God's plan, and for me to second guess it or judge it.
Is there anything you might do differently in retrospect now that time has passed a little bit?
No, sir.
You know, a detective said, you know, that Detective Singleton said, quoted you saying, the bad guys always get away. You also said that in the 911 tape. Did you have a feeling that there were a lot of people that do get away with crimes? In other words, were you sort of predisposed in your mind in some way to think that criminals get away too often?
Not in general. I think in our neighborhood, there's geographic advantages for burglaries.
Do you have any idea, why do you think Trayvon would have confronted you the way he did? I made a comment on the air one day and I got beaten up pretty bad for saying this could have all just been a terrible misunderstanding or mistake. Do you think maybe, is there any possibility he thought you were after him and you thought he was after you and there was some misunderstanding in any way?
I've wrestled with that for a long time, but I can't. One of my biggest issues through this ordeal has been the media, conjecture, and I can't assume or make believe.
The parents of Trayvon Martin, they lost their son. This is your first interview. What would you like to tell them?
I would tell them that, again, I'm sorry. I don't have, my wife and I don't have any children. I have nephews that I love more than life. I love them more than myself. And I know when they were born, it was a different, unique bond and love that I have with them. And I love my children even though they aren't born yet. And I am sorry that they buried their child. I can't imagine what it must feel like. And I pray for them daily.
Would you like to talk to them at some point?
I'm certainly open to it.
Welcome, Herb Boyd, to the show.
Thank you.
I'm glad you got here to see this. But how believable is this this actor? Obviously, because he was much slimmer and he looked much more hipper and had this little goatee, similar to yours, matter of fact. Well, he looked, I mean, he didn't look like a little schoolboy like he does now. And
but that often happens, you know, and Graham, we know that very well, how they get you ready for trial.
Okay.
They get you ready for it, a whole new look, a whole new posture and attitude and everything.
Like I wouldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I was beaten to almost the edge of my life.
Exactly. I mean, you know, you think about this situation, and it's kind of a terrible circumstance that we live in a nation in which there's a group of people who can expect just the absolute worst when it comes to a white man killing a black person.
But how about just plain fairness in front of the world this was?
Fairness goes out the door.
It has nothing to do with fairness.
You know, that whole jury played past a whole lot of fairness. Totally ignored that. Didn't mean anything at all to them.
This one broke my heart, man.
And Winston, you heard the juror just the other day. They, you know, she came forward. She had Anderson Cooper is talking to her.
Okay.
Book contract and everything. I think that's pretty much nil at this point. But nonetheless, and then you had the other 4 jurors who were contesting what her characterization.
That's right.
Of the trial.
Right.
But 3 of them had pretty much convinced that you know, he was guilty. I mean, they were going to like not guilty. They were going to like free him, and 2, you know, saying that, well, you know, and then of course you got the one who said that, you know, let's go with the first degree. So it was a second 1, 2, 3 breakdown in terms of the 6 women.
Okay.
And I would say this here. This is Seminole County down in Florida. And I think more than 10% of the population is African American.
10%?
Yeah. And they apparently could not come up with one, you know, juror that's of color. Not one.
Well, there's supposedly one.
There's supposedly, it's kind of so-called mixed ancestry, mixed, whether it's a Hispanic or what have you.
Right.
But nonetheless, you know, not an African American, not an African American. We didn't get one there. And as we know so well, within the legal arena, there are 3 key players. And actually 4 if you add the defense, but the prosecution, the judge, and the jury. And historically, we know that we've never got a fair shake, you know, when it came to where those individuals had nothing at all to do or any empathy or sympathy, you know, for our cultural history and circumstance.
Okay.
We knew that, I mean, 9 out of 10 people I talked to, Winston, was saying that they would be stunned if this man was convicted.
Really?
And that's kind of the attitude coming from black Americans.
Graham said right
I told Winston, they're not going to convict this guy. I told him that weeks ago.
I played Pollyanna. I just said, no. I mean, come on now.
Let's look.
The man killed.
Poor Pollyanna.
You know what I mean? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, the world's watching. This is 2000. 13, and it was obviously he chased the kid down and killed him. The kid is dead. And you listen to this man, you believe him and his story, his lies, his weave of lies? I mean, how is that possible?
When
right in front of everybody they're going to do this?
When black men are shot or beaten, they're supposed to be superhuman. And I'm going to go back historically. Let's go back to Rodney King. The beating that he took, and the cops said they were scared because he wouldn't stay down on the ground. Like he was some super ape. He was Mighty Joe Young, King Kong. And they had to keep beating him to make sure he stayed down.
And they would have gotten away with it if we didn't have the video.
With no video. Let me go on. Amadou Diallo. Murdered by Sean Carroll. And when I went over that crime scene, I was there that morning, but I did a ballistics analysis of that front door. And Amadou was standing on the front steps when he was gunned down. He wasn't in the vestibule because the bullet pattern is right there on the right side of the door jamb. If he had retreated into the vestibule, all the bullets would have been in the rear left side of the vestibule and not in the front right door jamb. He was gunned down and his body fell in the left corner of the vestibule. Sean Carroll said at trial, and Sean was facing him, no more than 5 feet away. He said the bullets had no effect on him. A 9mm round is traveling at 1,380 feet per second. Right? I poke you, you move. That's not 1,380 feet per second. But Sean Carroll said that this super end, the bullets had no effect on him. So they kept firing. You can move up to the Sean Bell case. Definitely overkill. And it is always the assumption. And then in this case, he says he shot him, but he didn't think he hit him. What are you talking about? Where did you have your gun pointed when you pulled the trigger? What was it? You had it behind you? Where? You shot this man dead center in his chest.
And you didn't know you shot him.
You didn't know you shot him, and he's there talking to you. You put a bullet through his heart. Right. Oh, you got me, blah, blah, blah. Again, superhuman.
We know that's garbage. We know that's garbage.
But this is the point. White juries swallow that stuff up as though they have to be protected from these superhuman, vile savages.
But what happens when you find out it was a human being and it was a 16-year-old and all, you know, if it hadn't a month, he was 3 weeks into his 17th year.
That doesn't end that doesn't end the stereotype. That doesn't end the characterization of the kind of superhuman aspect.
He was half Hispanic, so he's half brother, right?
It doesn't end it though, Winston.
Almost chicken don't make no soup.
Exactly. And one of the things about the Amadou Diallo case that, again, to get back to the legal arena, because that's where all this plays out.
Again, you're talking about cops getting away with murder. This is a civilian that had no authority to chase this man down. This is a civilian.
Yeah, this is a wannabe cop.
A wannabe cop. This is Amadou, we can talk about the police.
Well, those are for real. Those are stone, trigger-happy, overzealous.
All right, we know about them. But this is a civilian that had no right to get out of his car. And everybody knows that. So this is where the injustice comes. We can talk about all these cops, but this guy's not a cop.
And the prosecution consistently fails people of color in these cases, whether it's a cop doing the shooting or somebody else. The Ramarley Graham case, right? They broke every law in the book. They broke federal law and they broke state law, and they violated patrol guide procedures. Now, this cop will not stand in front of a jury. He's going to take a bench trial and watch, because cops never...
Who's this now?
Haste, Officer Haste in the Bronx. He's not going to take a jury trial because he's not going to trust his freedom and his life to the people of the Bronx. No. But the everyday felon arrested Ramarley Graham in the Bronx.
Ramarley Graham, okay.
But the everyday citizen is indicted and put on trial before a jury.
But this guy, they had a problem with the indictment.
They're redoing it.
They're redoing
They're
it.
redoing it.
Okay.
Because the DA failed
Okay.
to properly address the grand jury
Right. Okay.
when they did the summation before taking the tally. So the
But
judge
they
said,
they have an indictment now.
no, they haven't done it yet.
Okay.
They're working on pulling a jury together.
Okay.
But had the judge not dismissed it, there would have been grounds for an appeal if the cop lost.
Okay.
So the judge threw it out because he doesn't want the record to reflect that he failed to do something that he should have done, and as a result, the cop now has an appeal and might walk.
Okay.
You understand? So the grand jury presentation is going to be done, and it's interesting that Johnson's team, he always gets these lame duck DAs on these cases. They don't know how to present a case to the grand jury. They present thousands of cases a year, but on this case, they fail to follow procedure in charging the grand jury with the statutes. It's crazy. And you know, the people of the Bronx have backed Robert Johnson consistently. Consistently. D.A. Brown in Queens flaked out on the Bell family. I handed questions to the prosecution because they were failing to cross-examine bogus, quote-unquote, expert witnesses on ballistics. And I said, you all haven't done any homework. You just gonna let this guy stand up here and lie and ask him no questions? I was livid, but I told Mr. and Mrs. Bell, you know, this is not going anywhere.
Yes.
All right, back to Trayvon. I just want to.
Well, the prosecution, and I think you make a good point, Graham, because we are talking about how a case is prosecuted.
Okay.
And first of all, we wouldn't even have a case.
If it wasn't for Shark.
The Zimmerman thing would never happen had not been for, you know, the mass move, people saying we're upset with this, demonstrations, rallies occurred, and then a special investigator was brought in. And then so now we got to go with a trial. So in effect, this guy goes 44 days before he's really arrested.
Right.
So they're dragging their feet almost from the start.
Yeah.
So you're running with an anchor, they're 10 yards, the defense is already out in front of you. And then when you start adjudicating the case and you start bringing your witnesses there, apparently they did not go over very well and rehearse what's going to be said.
Right.
How are you going to? What are you going to say? Here's a question I'm going to put to you.
Right.
What's going to be your response to it? And you know that they rehearse that stuff all the time. But apparently that fell apart in 2 or 3 instances when they brought their witnesses up there, and the cross-examination that that Wes and Mark was able to do on that was very convincing. And then when they had the case and they brought their witnesses up there, those last 2 witnesses were very strong. So I can understand that just keep it within the legal context and say nothing about the 800-pound gorilla that's in the room called race. It's there.
They avoided that.
And so you go and you look at the case from, and I think the jury, selecting the jury is got to be the critical issue in this.
That's key.
I mean, that's where a case turns, you know. How do you go to your voir dires and get certain people on there and get certain people off there? I don't know what happened in terms of the overall jury pool and whether or not, and of course that's for registered voters, which says something about us in terms of like we gotta get out there and fully registered so you can be selected.
That's
and
it.
we're gonna participate
Right.
in this process.
You
But
gotta vote.
democracy,
You got to
justice, these highfalutin concepts have never really meant anything to us from the very beginning in the development of the U.S. Constitution. You know, right? We start with the U.S. Constitution, right down to the Dred Scott decision.
I was just thinking of that.
Right down to all of those cold cases that we know coming out of the civil rights movement, which there was no justice. I mean, how many years did it take in Medgar Evers? We're talking about the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Medgar Evers.
Right.
You know? And what has been done about that? We may well be in the draconian apartheid system of South Africa. And I guess tomorrow we'll be celebrating the birthday of Nelson Mandela.
95?
Exactly, 95 years of age, 27 years in prison. So it's some comparison, and he draws comparison in A Long Walk to Freedom. He talks about comparing the kind of system that existed over here, the hypocrisy, he calls it, not democracy, but hypocrisy. And we know it happens. The Supreme Court just made two absolutely ridiculous decisions. Has nothing at all. I mean, they could say something for one element of our community, but nothing at all when it comes to race. They seem to like tighten up.
Yesterday,
All right, you know what I'm going to do? Let me run this other clip.
Sure.
If you can stomach another few minutes of.
Oh, no, go ahead.
All right,
No,
because
hey,
I want people to get a good idea of what this man is about. Because I don't know if people really saw this Hannity thing, because we don't watch Fox. I want us to see this man the way he really is. All right. So let's play that other piece, and then maybe we'll take and hear from you. If you have something to say about that, I'm sure you do.
On at least 4 prior occasions, and had mentioned black male suspects. I wanted to give you a chance to respond. Why you called? What were those instances about?
They also stated that, and I never volunteered that information. It was always at their request that I described them, and even when I described them, I didn't volunteer the race until they asked me. And there was also Hispanic kids and white kids that were in the neighborhood.
That you made calls about?
Yes, sir.
There was an incident that I read, is this true, where you took on the local police department as it related to another case where there was, I understand, I think it was a homeless man?
Yes, sir.
That had been beaten up?
Yes, sir.
And the police were under fire?
Yes, sir.
And you came out publicly in favor of the person that was beaten up?
My wife and I saw that the story wasn't getting media coverage. There was one TV station that aired it, and it was not subject to interpretation. It was caught on video, and my wife and I, students and myself working full-time, decided that we had to try and do something. We drove around to churches on Sunday, put flyers on people's cars, most of the time approached people, handing out flyers, and we...
Is this person a minority?
Yes, sir.
And you felt was mistreated by the local police?
Yes, sir.
You took, what, as many as 2-3 lie detector tests, voice?
Computerized voice.
Computerized voice?
Yes, sir.
And the result was, quote, no deception indicated.
Yes, sir.
You did that voluntarily?
Absolutely.
Why?
I wanted to be as transparent with law enforcement as possible. I didn't have anything to hide.
George, there's the media, there's special interests, and the narrative it seems they want to make about this case is that, and you could read the articles if you haven't already, it's a white guy that killed an unarmed black youth holding Skittles and an iced tea. What do you say to that?
Again, I appreciate you not rushing to judgment. I think that people assumed I was white because of my last name. My father is Caucasian, my mother's Hispanic, but English was my second language, believe it or not. My grandmother and my mother raised me. Well, my dad was in the Army, and he wasn't home for a lot of my infancy, so I consider myself, first of all, an American, but a Hispanic American, and I don't think it's fair that they rush to judgment to assume that.
Do you feel the overwhelming majority of media rush to judgment?
Yes.
With few exceptions?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. I want to go back to one specific in the case, if I can. And it's the issue of you following him. And we heard, asked you earlier about the dispatch call, and you said you stopped, you didn't follow him. There's one moment that you were apparently, as you look at the grounds of where this took place, and there's the apartment, and there's the overhangs, and then there's another street on the other side, and you had gone to the other street, correct?
Yes, sir.
At some point. So how do you get to the other street if you're not following him? I mean, where were you going at that point?
I was walking from where I had parked my car towards my street. he went right down in between the houses. I walked straight across too.
But in that sense, were you following him?
No, sir.
You weren't following him?
No, sir.
And this is after the 911 call?
During
During the 911 call?
when they stated, we don't need you to do
So
that.
why were you walking back to your street and not back to the car
I was
at that point? If I'm trying to get the chronology right.
certainly where I had parked my car was the back of townhouses. There was no way to know what the street number was, and I knew if I walked straight through, it's a circle, Retreat View Circle. I knew if I walked straight through to there, that would be Retreat View Circle, and then I could tell them exactly what 1, 2, 3, 4 Retreat View Circle, and not just a general area of where my car was like I had done previously.
I asked you if you could speak to Trayvon Martin's family. I asked you if you could speak to even the American public. There's so many people that have so many opinions that vary so much. You know, if you wanted to look into that camera and tell the American public something about George Zimmerman and about this case with Trayvon Martin that has gotten such media attention, what would you want to tell them?
First, I'd like to readdress your question when you asked if I would have done anything differently. When you asked that, I thought you were referring to if I would not have talked to the police, if I would have maybe gotten an attorney, if I wouldn't have taken the CVSA, and that I stand by. I would not have done anything differently. But I do wish that there was something, anything I could have done that wouldn't have put me in the position where I had to take his life. And I do want to tell everyone, my wife, my family, my parents, my grandmother, the Martins, the city of Sanford, and America, that I'm sorry that this happened. I hate to think that because of this incident, because of my actions, it's polarized and divided America, and I'm truly sorry.
I mean, that's impressive, to say the least.
He was a neighborhood watchman.
He's conjuring up sympathy and an excuse for killing somebody.
He parks his car
on
in some block,
on
and he's supposedly going to his house. Why would you park your car in another block and walk to your house when you could drive to your house and park your vehicle, but you're following him?
Why is he making an excuse for not following Trayvon? He was following and chasing him down all along. I mean, that's a bald-faced lie.
Yes.
Plain and simple.
Yesterday, Attorney General Holder spoke before the NAACP National Convention, ironically, in Florida, in Orlando.
About 27 miles from Sanford.
And he said his father talked to him about interacting with the police when he was a boy, and how to behave and how to conduct themselves and how to conduct himself and how to talk. He said he has to do the same thing with his 15-year-old son. Because although there has been some progress in the country, certain things haven't changed. But one thing I noticed about the Attorney General is that he could not say the word race. He said there are things that we have to address. Why is it that the elephant in the room cannot be named? The Attorney General cannot say race is an issue in this country.
It was brought up that why bring
Nor
up
can the president.
Nor can the president.
why
Yes.
bring up racism when you know you're in a racist county?
You're in a racist country.
Well, we know that.
Yes.
So you appeal to the more or less human aspects. You don't expect. I mean, no. The point was that this man is obviously a liar,
Yes.
but somehow he made an appeal to set the stage for all these misjustices.
Sure. And the acquittal. And what happens with this is that, now this is what, a year, he had a whole year
To figure out his game.
do all of this here pandering, all this lying, you know, spreading this kind of like, hey, I'm the good guy, he's the bad guy.
Right.
And then, of course, he's got his defense who's picking up on this. And, of course, he's never going to go to he's not going to be on the stand. They're never going to put him on the stand.
You're right.
This is where he makes his case.
Right here.
He makes his case right here with the media and everything else.
Cross-examination.
And then it's up to his attorneys to pick up the strong points there and make sure that they convince that jury that here's this guy who, and it's self-defense, because they waived the whole stand your ground thing.
Right.
The judge brought that back in when she instructed the jury, because they had waived that thing because they were fearful.
He would have been convicted with that.
Exactly, because then, you know, in terms of what happens later on, and of course that's what they're talking about right now, whether the DOJ, whether the Department of Justice, how they're going to pursue this thing.
Yeah.
And it is ironic, though, Graham, that they're talking about boycotting, you know, the whole state now.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder has spoken out, say, I'm not going to go down there. But you have the NAACP, our leading civil rights organization, hosting their conference down there. I mean, weren't they thinking about this in advance? You know, this thing has been going on for a whole year now.
Florida's a nice
You know,
state.
why are you hosting your thing down there?
just
You should
down
have
there.
taken the first step on that.
I was just down there. It's a great place to go. I mean,
Well, that's the whole question in terms of like putting a boycott on it. It's a
the normal
tourist,
people
it's a
down there
tourist
were
heaven.
friendly. I mean, you go down south nowadays. I remember going down in the 60s and going down again in the 80s and 90s, and I had a Klansman standing next to me. I know he was an ex-Klansman because I knew them well when I was in the service.
Sure.
And he was just as friendly, and you know, they're all they're smiling in your face,
Yeah, but
and they're soft-spoken like
they'll
like
cut your
Zimmerman.
throat just as quick
Stab
as
you
they
in
talk.
the back as soon as you turn around.
So-
you know that.
You want to try some
it's a
call
game.
and see what other people have to
Sure,
say?
I'm hey, why not?
Put up a phone number. See if we can get somebody to call in. And no crank calls. I've heard a lot from a lot of different people. Matter of fact, I heard just yesterday that this was just nothing but a prelude to a race war. That they were just, you know, when Obama was elected, gun sales went up tenfold.
Oh, sure.
And now they were planning to assassinate Obama
And
to
the number
really
of right-wing
stimulate
organizations,
us
too,
into
Winston.
rage.
The number of right-wing organizations
Have tripled.
increased 400%.
400%.
400%.
It's interesting that they want clergy and politicians to tell black people
All right, we have two callers.
to
Let's
maintain their
see what
cool,
they have
but
to
when
say.
a black person gets off,
Exactly.
they don't tell the white people to maintain their cool.
Yes.
All right, caller. Give us your question. Hopefully you have a question and not a long statement.
Could be.
Speak your piece.
Welcome.
Oh, yes. Hello, Mr. Gilchrist. This is another time. And then this is Gilchrist. Hello. I want to say that from the outset,
Turn your television off.
he was going to be ready to go. We already saw it coming from the moment he wasn't arrested the first 45 days when it first happened. At the same time, let's not forget where we're living. Just because the United States Slave Code made that amendment from the Constitution, the ideal of white supremacy is in full effect. And there are a lot of Caucasians who are living in a USD, the United States of denial. And we have to wake up and stop kidding ourselves as well, we so-called African American descent, that things have changed in this country. If we have criminals disguised as police officers, I always say criminals disguised as police officers, because once you enter blind, denied, alibi, conniving, that's criminality. If they can get away with killing us, now we have white civilians being given the green light to shoot us down too. So what we're looking at the anti-black idealism ever since Barack Obama became the president of the United States, and they're showing you where they're really coming from. So I think there's a race war pending in this country, whether we can see it or not, but I'm gearing up because they're going to bring it. And with that, I thank you for your time, and have a good day, and gentlemen, take care of yourself.
Thank you.
All right, before we answer that, we'll just give us another call and we'll take the two at the same time. I didn't quite understand what he said, but
Hello?
yes.
Hello.
Okay, good evening, brother.
Evening.
Just to respond to Brother Witherspoon's point about Eric Holder not mentioning the word race, you have to remember that it was in that speech, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, when he said that we are a nation of cowards when it comes to race. And you can remember the President Obama, their hands are literally tied behind their back when it comes to confronting the issue of race head on. And another question I have is, it seems like whenever incidents like this happen, you know, you listen to all the talking heads on the major news outlets, and you get all this over-intellectualizing of what happened. You get the legal pundits and whatnot, and, you know, it just seems like they're trying to, or the black community is trying to give logic to an issue that is irrational and illogical when they kill
Absolutely.
it. So, and the question I have is that why is it that whenever a police officer gets killed, even if it looks like it's a case of someone defending themselves against a police officer, why is the threshold always so low to prove that this person murdered a police officer? But yet, when one of us gets murdered by them, you have to go through all of these loopholes and just all of this legal jargon to prove that this person was murdered. You know, I'm just saying, it's like the double standard is just so blatant. You know, it's like whenever a cop gets murdered, it's like open and shut case. And that person, somebody's going to pay for it. Even if it's the wrong person, even if that cop was committing an act of brutality, they're going to get somebody.
One
So
question.
maybe you can respond to that.
What my first response is, why are we putting Zimmerman in the part of an officer?
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, let me finish.
Sure.
Now, all of us, all three of us here, we can equate him as the same, you know, like he's a cop. He's a wannabe cop. He's a civilian. He should have never gotten out of his car. In this particular instance, we have every argument in the world to deal with cops, but this is a civilian. This man should have never gotten out of his car. He should be in jail now under manslaughter charges. That's what the reality of it is. This civilian should have never gotten out of his car and chased this kid anywhere. He had no right to do that.
But remember, his father is part of the system.
Who's a
His father
judge?
was a judge.
His father's a judge.
And I think that another point that people fail to raise is that Trayvon Martin, why couldn't they present the scenario that he was actually defending his life?
Well, that's
Precisely.
the truth.
Yes.
That's the truth.
So why is the burden of proof on Trayvon Martin to show that he wasn't a threat? George Zimmerman was the threat.
We got a lot of calls on here, but you know what it was? They turned it around. Now, we have an editor here, probably has an explanation for that one. They just turned it around. I mean, it's quite obvious. They just turned it around. He's clever. Trayvon is dead. He can't defend himself.
Exactly.
Trayvon had a 3.7 index in school. He had a scholarship to college.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
And that never
they
came
said
out.
that he was using marijuana and taking pictures with guns.
Yeah,
But
they set him up.
Zimmerman doesn't take the stand to let the people know that he was arrested
For fighting
and
a cop.
charged with battery against his girlfriend at one point, had an order of protection.
Right.
He was involved in an incident with a police officer.
Right.
You know, he has a record. And what he's doing with a gun is beyond me.
All right.
And how they allow that animation in there is just beyond me. I mean, that should have been like, boom, the judge should have stopped that one right away.
Well, what?
How are you going to admit something?
You get what you pay
because
for.
of provocation.
And you cannot initiate a fight and then claim self-defense.
How can you do that? That's exactly what happened, though.
Yes.
Good lawyers. All right? Let's take the next caller. All right? Next caller, please.
Hello?
Yes.
You're on.
Yeah.
Quick.
I think what happened was the jury selection was the key role in this case.
Yes.
The district attorney did not have a very good strategy. He did not call in any outside help to help him formulate a strategy to deal with it, to attack this issue. And you got to understand, remember, this is the state that stole an election. They stole it, they flipped it, they bamboozled it, and if you can steal an election, you can do anything else legally or unethically. And it started with them stealing the election.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
right.
The next caller, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'll make it quick because of time restraints. There are two things that were really not touched on, and I just got into your show. The first is that Trayvon Martin, and we have to remember he was a child.
Right.
What he should have done, and again, I know he was a child, is he should have called the police or ran home and said, listen, somebody's following me. I don't know who he is. I'm a 17-year-old kid. And they would have sent the police car over there. Now, George Zimmerman, being the adult, had to take the bigger of the responsibilities. What he should have done, if he suspected this boy, and whatever his reasons for suspecting him, he looks like the typical type of person that has come into our neighborhood and robbed it before. He should have remained in the car, as the police had said. He should have kept his windows closed and his doors locked, and he should have stayed on the phone with the police and then just followed him and made sure that he didn't break into any homes. Having said that, the district attorneys, but it doesn't give Trayvon Martin the right to approach him to say, listen, I don't want to be followed by you. It's not against the law to follow someone unless it can be proven that they are stalking you. The DA was wrong because he didn't charge George Zimmerman with criminally negligent manslaughter. He just charged him with manslaughter. And see, there are different degrees of manslaughter. Had he charged him with that, then George Zimmerman could have done between 5 to 7 years in prison, and he could have been prevented from owning a gun for X amount of years, and he could have been liable for a civil suit. So you see, it's the district attorney's fault because they were using race to try to make points. If they cared about the lives of any children, white or black, over the 4th of July weekend, in one day, 45 shootings of black people by black people, 9 of which died. You don't see anybody saying, let's boycott Illinois. Because, unfortunately, there are black people, and I'm going to say this straight out, they don't care that their black children are being killed. They only want to make sure the killers themselves are black. That's all they care about. Because look at all the black children and white children that are killed, and you don't hear the same outrage. Thank you.
Well, you know what? You know what? She is absolutely right. See, this is exactly how the world sees us. When they see us killing each other, the way we kill each other, they don't. We have no respect for ourselves as. Now, she has every right to say what she said.
No doubt.
Because why don't we care more about how we kill each other? It's how we treat each other that we get people like this out here. Well, you guys don't care about each other, so why should we care about you? See, but another thing that you might understand, caller, is that Zimmerman never identified himself. There was no situation where, instead of saying, where you going, boy, I mean, he might even said that. You know, what you doing around here, boy? All right? Instead of saying that, why don't you say, I'm the neighborhood cop. I'm in the neighborhood. You looking for security around here. Are you going somewhere? What's your name? My name is so-and-so. Instead of chasing him down the street like he's already guilty. And he wound up being wrong.
Well, it's very difficult, Winston, for us to know exactly what occurred.
Of course not.
You know, what nature of conversation there was.
Right.
Who was, in fact, who provoked this, this whole fight that broke out?
Trayvon got a shot, and thank God he got a shot.
Well, when you have that eyewitness who's watching it and going by the colors that they wear, that obviously Trayvon had the best of him.
Right.
He had turned the tables on. In fact, if Zimmerman attacked him, suddenly he was at a disadvantage, and he had him down and was pounding on him.
When did Zimmerman take the gun out?
Well, that's when you get into the question of when and under what state of mind did he fire the bullet. I mean, that's where the jurors coming back and saying that that was critical for them. But you know, they got, what, nearly 30 pages of instruction.
When did he take the gun out?
And what your caller is talking about, one of the things that talk about the levels of manslaughter, look at what happened with Oscar Grant. Now, there's a film out there called The Fruitvale Station.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if people can take any more of this injustice and the brutality, you know, and the death of our young black men.
He was shot right there on the platform.
Yeah, but he was charged with, and they finally convicted of involuntary manslaughter, which I was hoping that that would be one of the charges, because that's a lesser charge. At least you get some kind of conviction out of it. And that particular police officer who claimed that he was reaching for his taser and grabbed his gun by mistake and shot Oscar Grant and killed him. And he got 11 months. That's it. That's all.
But
they
again,
charged
you're
with.
talking about a police officer, not a
Yes.
civilian.
Well, you know, we got too many instances of that right here in the city. Graham has just touched on 4 or 5 of them.
Where
and
cops
even with,
did
and even with the
something
Amadou
wrong.
Diallo
Now
situation, we get back to the legal
We got a
arena.
civilian that got away with murder.
Oh yeah,
We got a civilian here. That's what I'm so outraged. We got a lot of calls, and only a few minutes to go. So call up.
Sure.
No more calls. Okay. All right. We only have a few minutes left, but I'd like to thank you all. Graham has to leave. All right. Thank you for coming, Graham. I'll see
My
you
pleasure.
later. Yeah, just go
Till the
ahead.
next time.
All right. Go ahead. All right. We only got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes?
Just a couple minutes.
Thank you for coming. What do we got? 56, 57.
You need a part 2 on this one.
All right. You come back next week?
Yes,
All right,
because there's
all
going to
right.
be some new developments on
Yeah,
this, I'm
all
sure.
right. So thanks for coming. We got to roll in at the end. But thank you for coming. The God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned. We're going to come back to some more of the Gilchrist experience. So thank you for coming, gentlemen.
It's a pleasure.
All right.
Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Most of us blacks, or Negroes as he called us, really thought we were free without being aware that in our subconscious, all those chains we thought had been struck off were still there. And there were many ways where what really motivated us was our desire to be loved by the white man. Malcolm meant to lance that sense of inferiority. He knew it would be painful. He knew that people could kill you because of it, but he dared to take that risk.
He was saying something over and above that of any other leader of that day. While the other leaders were begging for entry into the house of their oppressor, he was telling you to build your own house.